I don't really think that I noticed it very much to begin with. Like there'd be the odd comment, like you play quite well for a girl, or don't your boobs get in the way of the guitar? And but these were fairly infrequent. They weren't they didn't punctuate every single gig, but they started to become just enough gigs that that was happening at for me to then suddenly start feeling less safe. I think probably I made the assumption that because I was a musician and I was on stage rather than being in the audience, that I had a degree of protection, that I felt I was safer. And one particular gig, we were playing in London, and two instances of sexual assault occurred on the same night in the same venue. Someone tried to grab me off stage mid show. And of course, you're playing metal, aren't you? So it was really loud on stage. My bandmates couldn't hear me. So there was that. And then I had two guys waiting outside the toilet for me after the show when I came out and pinned me up against the wall. That was a turning point for me. That was when I realized that even though in my mind I had separated myself as being on stage, and therefore it was more of a controlled environment. I wasn't on the floor with the audience where I didn't know what was going to happen. It didn't actually prevent things like that happening. And it just slowly but surely, it just increased over time. I mean, I spent probably over a decade playing death metal. And then I just had enough, and I'm like, I'm not doing this anymore, and I quit. And then 4 years later, I started a black metal band, and my engagement with black metal has been entirely different. And this is what I write about in my monograph. It's not a perfect subgenre. It has a lot of really, really big problems. But the one thing it doesn't seem to have a problem with is women. It kind of bemoans the lack of women rather than using women as fodder for album covers and band names and lyrics and other shit like that, where you just think, is the world so devoid of problems that that's your source of inspiration, is it? So I I realized increasingly that my feminism was incompatible with my love of death metal. So I had to find another extreme form of music that made me just as happy musically and compositionally, but I wasn't quite so confronted with violence against women images everywhere. I mean, I talk about it in here. There's a book called Under My Thumb, the songs that hate women and the women who love them. And I decided to write about, I mean, everybody writes about Cannibal Corpse, fucked with a knife, etc., etc. And it's kind of, you know, it gets talked about a lot at conferences, and we're kind of done. But there are plenty of other bands that have decided to step into that position. Most notably for me is Prostitute Disfigurement. I mean, what the fuck? How could you? I mean, it's just so tiring. There is so much wrong in the world. I don't see, you know, who is this concept of brutality? Well, this, for women, this is our everyday existence, right? This is not unusual. This is not an anomaly. This isn't, you know, some fun thing to write about. This is, you know, if we survive this shit, we're lucky. So what the fuck are you doing writing about it? Like, how is this your content for your songs? It just seems crazy to me. You know, they've got songs like Dismember the Transgender and On Her Guts I Come. And I'm like, fuck me, how old are you? 12? And so I I took issue with all of this. I was kind of expecting a bit of backlash, but nothing yet. But you know, there are plenty of bands out there that play death metal and grinds that just aren't like that, and that's where you should take your joy from. So that's kind of what that was my relationship with death metal. But then I discovered castrator and I was very happy because, oh, it's so good. But then I kind of got into black metal, and I discovered that due to my experience with domestic abuse, I felt like I was trapped in this abyss, and I needed to know what that meant and how could I heal my trauma without having to pay for therapy, because in my experience, therapy just doesn't really help with trauma. But metal does massively. I mean, I've lost count, and I definitely know I'm not alone. I've lost count of the amount of times that metal has saved my life over the years. And this was no different. So I needed to find a form of extreme metal that was representative of this abyss, and that was black metal.